The morning had started like any other in my quiet cul-de-sac, with the soft hum of sprinklers and the faint chirping of birds. The smell of freshly brewed coffee drifting from my kitchen into the living room where I stood watching the light spill across the driveway. Except this time there was something unusual. A car I didn't recognize sitting partially in front of my garage door. Sleek and shiny like it had just rolled out of the dealership, still wearing the temporary paper plates taped to the inside of the back window. And my first thought was that maybe a visitor had parked wrong or one of the neighbors had guests over and misjudged the space, but when I stepped outside in my slippers to investigate, I realized the nose of the car wasn't just near my garage, it was inside my garage. The garage door left slightly ajar, as if someone had been in a hurry and didn't bother closing it all the way, and my stomach dropped because my garage wasn't just where I kept my own car, tools, and storage bins. It was locked and private. And the only way for that vehicle to be inside was for someone to have forcibly opened it or gotten in with a code they shouldn't have. So I marched over, phone in my pocket in case this was about to turn into a police call, and reached to lift the garage door fully open when I heard her voice. That sharp, grating tone I'd come to know too well over the last 3 months since moving here. The unmistakable HOA Queen Bee herself, Karen, storming across the street with her phone already in her hand, eyes wide and face flushed like I'd just committed a capital crime, shouting, "That's my car! You're stealing my car! I just bought it this morning." Loud enough for the whole block to hear, and I froze for half a second, blinking in disbelief. Because 1, I had never seen her with this car before, and 2, how in the world did she think I was stealing something sitting in my locked garage? But before I could even explain, she had her phone up, camera recording, narrating in that overly dramatic influencer wannabe tone. Here he is, neighbors, caught in the act, breaking into my car. Oh my gosh, I can't believe this. He's been trouble since day 1, and now I have proof. And I could feel my pulse quicken, not out of guilt but out of sheer frustration. Because Karen had been on my case since the week I moved in, sending me passive-aggressive HOA notices for ridiculous things like my trash cans being visible for 5 minutes too long on collection day, or my front door paint being too vibrant for the community aesthetic. And now she was escalating it into full-blown public accusations of theft. But I wasn't about to back down. I calmly reached into my pocket, pulled out my own phone, and started recording too, walking toward the garage with deliberate slowness. As I said, "Karen, this is my garage on my property, and I have no idea how your car got here, but I'd love to hear your explanation," which only seemed to fuel her drama, because she clutched her pearls, literally she wears them almost, every day, and gasped as if I'd just confessed to some nefarious crime, yelling, "I knew it. I knew you were shady. I'm calling 911 right now," and sure enough she dialed, pacing back and forth at the end of my driveway while she gave the dispatcher this wild, exaggerated version of reality, claiming she had just caught a neighbor breaking into her brand new car and attempting to drive it away, conveniently leaving out the part where the car was mysteriously inside my garage without my consent. And I glanced back at the vehicle, noting that the driver's side door was slightly ajar, the smell of that new car interior wafting out, and on the passenger seat sat a large purse that I recognized from previous HOA meetings, Karen's signature oversized designer tote, which only deepened the mystery. Because if she really had just bought this car, how had it ended up inside my locked garage while I was inside my own house? I replayed the last hour in my mind, trying to figure out if I'd heard any noises, any sounds of someone tampering with the garage. But I hadn't, and that's when it hit me. I'd been in the shower for 15 minutes earlier, and Karen must have known, since she's constantly spying from across the street, meaning she could have used that window to slip into my property, probably using the keypad on the side of the garage, which had been glitchy for months and sometimes opened without the right code, and then parked her car inside for who knows what reason. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that reason might be malicious. Maybe she was trying to frame me, set up some gotcha moment to get me fined or even evicted, because she'd made it abundantly clear since day 1 that she didn't want me in this neighborhood, always muttering about certain people not fitting in. And now, with the police on their way, she was clearly hoping to turn this into the ultimate weapon against me, so I did the only thing I could. I called my own backup, which in this case was my brother, a criminal defense attorney who lived 10 minutes away, and told him to get here ASAP because I suspected this was going to escalate fast. And sure enough, within 5 minutes we heard the distant wail of sirens, Karen practically vibrating with excitement like a kid on Christmas morning, calling out to the approaching squad car, "Over here, officers." "Over here." I caught him red-handed as they pulled up and stepped out, looking between the two of us with that weary expression cops get when they know it's going to be one of those calls. And I could already tell this was about to be one for the books. When the officers finally stepped into my driveway, the flashing lights bouncing off the garage door, I stood there with my arms crossed, watching as Karen theatrically pointed at the black SUV parked inside as if she had just uncovered a stolen diamond shipment. "That's my car. He stole it right out of my driveway this morning," she shrieked, her voice sharp enough to make the younger officer flinch. But the older cop, clearly seasoned to Karen's brand of neighborhood melodrama, simply sighed and asked for proof. Karen, in her dramatic fashion, produced a crumpled bill of sale that she waved in the air like it was the Declaration of Independence. Except the paper was clearly printed from an inkjet, the font suspiciously large, and the dates didn't even match. She claimed to have bought the car yesterday, yet my paperwork from the dealership was dated 6 months prior. I calmly reached into the fireproof folder I keep in my home office, thanks to Karen. I've learned to keep evidence close at hand, and pulled out the original title, bill of sale, Vang documentation, and even the photo of me shaking hands with the salesman the day I bought it, the SUV gleaming under dealership lights. When I laid the documents across the hood for the officers to inspect, Karen leaned forward as if she could find some invisible loophole. But her fake smile faltered the moment the older cop read the name on the title out loud. My name matched it against my driver's license. "Ma'am, this vehicle is registered to him, not you," he said flatly. But Karen was never one to back down when caught, so she switched tactics faster than a politician mid-scandal, claiming now that she had purchased it from a guy who told her he had just repossessed it from me for non-payment. Her story was unraveling by the second, but she kept going, digging herself into a crater-sized hole as she threw in fabricated details about my debt problems and unpaid HOA fees, even though I don't belong to the HOA and have zero debt. I could see the younger officer trying not to smirk, but Karen, perhaps sensing her control of the situation slipping, stomped toward my garage like she owned the place, declaring she had the right to take her property back. That was the moment I decided to stop playing defense. My garage is under constant surveillance, with motion-activated cameras that upload directly to a secure cloud server. So I tapped my phone and began streaming the footage from earlier that day for the officers. The clip showed Karen, in broad daylight, walking up my driveway, jiggling the garage handle, then trying to peer through the side window before being startled by the sound of my neighbor's lawnmower and scurrying away. The cops watched silently, and then I switched to a video from last week that showed Karen circling my house in her sedan, slowing down every time she passed my garage. "Looks like she's been shopping for this car for a while," I said dryly, and the older cop finally turned to her with the stern, parental tone of someone who's just realized they're dealing with a habitual liar, telling her that making a false police report is a crime, and that if she continued, she'd be facing charges. She tried to backpedal, claiming it was just a misunderstanding, but the damage was done. The officers took her statement, mine, and informed her she'd be leaving without the SUV, which she clearly hated because as they walked her back toward the street, she tossed over her shoulder, "This isn't over," a phrase I'd heard from her enough times to know it meant she'd be plotting something new by the end of the week. What she didn't know was that my patience had worn thin months ago, and I'd already been collecting a file thick enough to make any prosecutor smile, documenting every incident where she trespassed, harassed, or fabricated claims against me. Now, with police bodycam footage, my surveillance videos, and the fake bill of sale she herself handed over, I had everything I needed to turn the tables, and if she wanted to take this to court, Well, she was about to discover that my day job gave me a significant advantage in a courtroom, one she'd never see coming until the moment she was standing under oath. Karen must have thought her dramatic, "This isn't over" exit was the end of it, but for me, it was the green light to stop merely defending myself and start dismantling her ability to pull stunts like this ever again. Because over the months, she'd lived 2 houses down. She'd pulled everything from blocking my driveway to reporting me for running a car chop shop, just because I'd changed my own brake pads. So that night, after the police report was officially filed, I sat at my desk with a cup of coffee and began compiling my evidence into a single, airtight dossier: timestamps, witness statements from neighbors, photos, and most importantly, my security footage. I even retrieved the HOA's own meeting minutes from when she had tried to motion for an investigation into suspicious activities at my address, only to be shut down because I wasn't part of the HOA, meaning they had no jurisdiction. The next morning, I walked into the county courthouse and filed a formal harassment and trespassing complaint, attaching every piece of documented proof along with a request for a restraining order. And because I know the clerk from years of volunteer work with the sheriff's community outreach program, the paperwork was processed faster than usual. Within 48 hours, a deputy was knocking on Karen's door to serve her the notice, and I swear I could hear her shouting from my kitchen window, disbelief dripping from every word as she read the bold letters instructing her to stay a minimum of 100 feet from me, my property, and my vehicle. Her first counterattack was as predictable as it was weak. She tried to hold an impromptu HOA meeting in her driveway, rallying the usual group of gossip-hungry residents, claiming I had political connections and was using them to silence her, but unfortunately for her, my next move wasn't political, it was legal. I filed a small claims case for the attempted theft of my SUV, complete with a request for reimbursement of the legal costs I'd incurred over her false police call. When she tried to dismiss the case on the grounds that it was just a misunderstanding, the judge who, it turned out, had already read the police report wasn't having it, and set the hearing date 3 weeks out. During that time, Karen doubled down on her tactics, leaving passive-aggressive notes on my mailbox, glaring at me whenever I drove past, and even once accidentally standing in the street to block my car from entering my driveway until I honked, all of which I documented with fresh footage and sent straight to my attorney. The day of the hearing, she strutted into the courtroom wearing a power red blazer like she was about to deliver a TED Talk. But the confidence evaporated the moment I connected my laptop to the court's display and played the video of her approaching my garage, rattling the handle and peering inside before running off. The judge paused the video halfway, looked directly at her and asked, "Is that you?" To which she stammered something about checking on a neighbor's property. But then I pulled up her fake bill of sale and the vagueness match. You could practically hear the air leave her lungs. The judge didn't just rule in my favor, he also awarded me damages to cover my legal fees and tacked on a warning that any further false reports or trespassing would result in criminal charges. As I walked out of the courthouse with the signed judgment in my hand, Karen muttered something about appealing, but the truth was she had no ground to stand on anymore. The restraining order stood, the police now had her on record for filing a false report, and the neighbors, many of whom had been neutral before, started quietly avoiding her after realizing she could just as easily turn on them. I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd finally leave me alone, but 3 days later, I spotted her in the grocery store parking lot, sitting in her car with her phone pointed at my SUV like she was filming it. I smiled, waved, and called out loud, "Enough for her to hear. Make sure you get my good side. It's all going in the next court file." And for once, she didn't have a comeback, just slammed her car door and drove off. In that moment, I knew the balance of power had shifted permanently. Karen could still huff, glare, and plot, but the days where she could weaponize the police or the HOA against me were over. And now, every time she so much as looked my way, she had to think about the thick, damning file with her name on it sitting in my cabinet, ready to be opened at the first sign of trouble. The courtroom was packed, every seat taken, the air thick with the scent of stale coffee and tension as I walked in. Calm and deliberate, while Karen sat at the plaintiff's table flanked by her lawyer, her expression a grotesque mixture of smugness and faux innocence, glancing back at the spectators as though she were the star of some reality TV drama and had already won. She didn't know that her entire narrative was about to collapse in spectacular fashion because I had spent the week since that absurd 911 call gathering every scrap of evidence, every document and every video angle to prove that the car in question had never belonged to her in the first place, but had, in fact, been mine since the day I purchased it brand new from the dealership, long before she even moved into the neighborhood. The judge, a seasoned no-nonsense man with silver hair and piercing eyes, called the court to order, and Karen's lawyer rose dramatically, launching into a speech about how my supposed theft of her newly purchased luxury SUV had caused her emotional trauma and public embarrassment, painting her as some tragic heroine wronged by a deceitful neighbor while I sat silently, letting him dig the hole deeper because the truth was coming like a freight train and there was no stopping it. When it was my turn, I stood, cleared my throat, and laid out my evidence methodically, original bill of sale with my name on it, registration records dating back years, insurance documents, service receipts, and the pièce de résistance, high-definition security footage from my garage camera showing me driving the SUV in and out countless times over the past 5 years, including the very morning Karen had barged in and accused me of stealing it. The footage even captured her standing in my driveway screaming into her phone to 911, claiming she had just bought it yesterday, which of course was impossible. Her face paled visibly as the footage played on the courtroom's large monitor, the gasps from the audience punctuating every frame, and by the time the judge turned his attention back to her, she was squirming in her seat, tugging at her necklace and glancing desperately at her lawyer, who was now scribbling frantically on a legal pad as if he could magically undo the damage. But I wasn't finished. I revealed the results of my private investigator's work, which showed that Karen had recently been trying to fake claim ownership of several high-value items in the neighborhood using fabricated Facebook Marketplace receipts printed at home to create false purchase histories, and in one particularly brazen case, she had even attempted to file a title transfer for a boat belonging to another neighbor, an attempt that was quickly denied by the DMV. This wasn't just about my SUV anymore. It was a pattern of attempted theft, and the judge was starting to see it clearly. Karen's lawyer tried to object, claiming the investigator's report was irrelevant, but the judge overruled him, noting that the evidence spoke to her credibility, or rather, her complete lack thereof. The turning point came when the dealership manager himself, called as my witness, took the stand and confirmed under oath that the vehicle had been sold to me years ago, that no sale had ever been made to Karen, and that her receipt was a laughable counterfeit using a template downloaded from the internet, right down to the same stock watermark. The courtroom erupted in murmurs, and Karen's lawyer visibly deflated, knowing there was no salvaging this. Then the judge delivered his ruling. Not only was her claim dismissed with prejudice, meaning she could never bring it back, but he also found her liable for legal fees, punitive damages for defamation, and even referred the case to the district attorney for potential criminal charges of filing a false police report and attempted fraud. Karen's jaw dropped so hard I thought it might dislocate, and she let out an audible, "What?" before the bailiff shot her a warning look. I could feel the satisfaction radiating through me, not just because I had one, but because the entire neighborhood had finally seen her for who she truly was, a manipulative, entitled troublemaker who thought she could bully and bluff her way into taking whatever she wanted. As the court adjourned, several neighbors approached me outside, shaking my hand and thanking me for standing up to her, some even admitting they had been too afraid to confront her before, worried about her vindictive nature. A week later, I heard from a mutual acquaintance that Karen had been formally charged, and when the police came to her house to serve her, she allegedly screamed about conspiracies and neighbor gangs before being taken away. As for me, I drove my SUV home with the windows down and music playing, pulling it proudly into my garage where it had always belonged, feeling that deep, rare sense of justice not just for myself, but for everyone she had tried to push around. because this time the bully got burned in her own fire, and the lesson was loud enough for the entire town to hear.